So, hello and welcome to episode 14 of Intruder Theatre in the Making podcast. I'm your host, Remi Rachuba, and thank you so much for tuning in. Now, today we've got a co-host, and that is Marcus Montgomery Roche, the director of Intruder. Marcus, hello.
Hello, and thank you for having me on your amazing podcast, Remy.
Thank you so much for joining me on the Theatre World Day, right? That is today. That's when we're recording the podcast.
Yeah, it's nice to be thinking about this show, especially as it's 1 year since we were really supposed to be putting it on. To think about it on World Theatre Day, and hope that the future World Theatre Days will be a bit more jolly for us theatre.
Yeah, that will be 2022. Oh God.
Yeah.
Hopefully we can survive the next the rest of 2021. But thank you so much for having the time to speak to me and to the people who listen to the podcast on Intruder. But before we move on with the podcast, I just to have a little bit of a reminder for people, anyone who wants to chip in and help me with Patreon and become the patron of the podcast, they can do so and help me and go on my website where they can find the link and become the patron for less than a coffee. That is £1. We thought that we could actually talk about how we met. I mean, for some people that don't know, we went to the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland and we did MA-CCT, MA in Classical and Contemporary Text Acting, and then I was the trailblazer, and then you were the year after me.
That's right. We were the second cohort on the Masters.
Yeah.
And you were already famous because you had lit up the stage with this amazing production of Lear, which is all anyone talked about when we arrived at drama school.
Did they? I mean, I didn't know anything about that, but
it was as if it was the production to compare ourselves to when we arrived. It was Remi Rachuba in Lear. But funnily enough, we didn't even meet at that point.
No, we didn't meet. I remember, with MACCTs, I'm not really sure where they still do it, but they did these kind of meetings between the year that was finishing and the people that were just coming on. And I was at that time in Brighton doing a Dream Things Speak production, so I never went to it. And maybe you met some people then, but I was never part of that conversation. The only time that I remember your name was when then you brought your new shows, I think, to London. You were working with Nicola, right? Nicola, what was her surname?
Yes, I was directing Nicola McCartney's play.
Oh yeah, Nicola McCartney's, and I saw it in London, and I always remember that I was watching it, and I thought, oh, that's actually interesting. Some of the scenes that you did, the policeman driving when I think Jessie was with her back to the audience and the other girl, I don't remember her name. And I thought, and there was this kind of blue fish. Wasn't that like a bluefish something?
Oh yes, yes, it was. Yes,
yes. So that's what I remember. And this amazing actress with long dark hair, and I just thought, oh my God, that was something that I thought, I quite enjoyed it. But I don't think we met then. We met later on working on The Builders, where you were a stage manager, which I remember very well.
Yeah. By that point, I'd been working with the director of that production as his stage manager. He was actually the first person to teach me any clowning, Tim McCata. And he was directing this show, this Finnish show, the Builders, absurd for
Yeah.
this show, and that's where we properly got to work together for the first time.
That, yeah, we got to work on that. But prior to that, I remember I submitted myself for Macbeth you were directing and on Spotlight, and I never got any replies back. Yeah. So I always
Well,
thought, well, that Marcus Roche, I don't know about him, you know, because he never responds to emails on Spotlight. So I always remember that my submission to play Macbeth, that went completely, well, nobody replied to that, and I'm still waiting for their reply, and it's been 10 years. So why wasn't I contacted? Can you explain that to me now?
well, thank you for getting in touch, Remi, with our production. We've had so many applications of just such a high caliber. Yeah, I can only say I have to ask you to forgive my younger self for not getting back to you, Remi, for 10 years. Is it worth that I officially say I'm sorry you've not got an audition this time, but do keep in touch?
Yes, keep in touch. It's interesting how you, at some point in your life, bump into the people that you met many years ago, or you wrote to them many years ago, and you go, why wasn't I emailed back about something? Or it's a different conversation after so many years, to be quite honest.
Yeah, I think it's something I've certainly tried to become better at, but I know, I'm not perfect. But as I'm sure you can attest, Remi, that the people you think have the least time are the people who email you back straight away.
Yeah.
So we should really honor people that write to us and with a reply.
Yeah, and then we worked on the Builders, and then we really didn't stay. I mean, we were in touch, but it wasn't like a regular contact. It was then in 20, when was it, 2017, when I was doing Lucia, that you came to see it, right? You came to
Yeah,
see Lucia di Lammermoor. We met after it, but it was just like, hello, nice to see you. And then when Amanda passed, then I got I got in touch with you. And what do you remember from that meeting? Because that's what I talked about in the previous episode of the podcast. How do you remember that meeting?
I remember sitting in the coffee shop and both of us kind of talking around the play. I actually remember that we didn't seem to talk much about the play at all for
No.
about 40 minutes. And
Yeah.
then you went to the toilet and disappeared. And I was kind of thinking, are we ever going to talk about the play? Or maybe we should just, it's funny because you'd ask me, at that point, would I read the play? What did I think? And so we were there having this meeting, and I kind of thought, well, surely Remi knows that we wouldn't be having this meeting if I didn't think that we should be working on the play in some capacity.
Oh
So,
no, I didn't think that. I wasn't particularly expecting anything from that meeting. I think
which
that, yeah, just you meet people just to have a chat, but maybe that's how people work, and that maybe I should have been thinking that if we were meeting, that's a good sign. But I thought, isn't it what people do? They just meet and discuss things and then say yes or no. Do you know what I mean? I didn't even think that meeting is already a step forward.
Yeah, and I think that's one of these things that I think that's just wonderful about you, Remi. Which is true. I'm sitting there thinking, well, let's do it, and you're sitting there going, oh, is he going to say yes.
Yeah, I remember that when you said let's do it, I was like, oh my God, thank God for that. I don't need to say what I've been praying to, to say for a long time. So yeah,
Well,
that was a good thing. Oh my God, thank you for that.
well,
And
I'd read the play
yeah,
and I'd enjoyed reading it. And I enjoyed our chats and thought, well, there's only so much you can understand about a play from reading it. You can understand an
yeah,
awful lot, but you can get a sense, you can get a feel for what's going on. It can evoke a feeling in you, but until you actually see it and you actually hear it on stage, that's
yeah,
when that's when you know if you if the play is really good. So we had to, in essence, find a way to do that and to put it up on stage to find out what's in it.
yeah, yeah. That is true. And then, of course, we're going to, well, in the next episode, I'm going to talk about, the journey afterwards, so the rehearsed readings. But I really wanted to spend some time talking about you as the director and just coming back to kind of getting to know you. God, someone is just banging on the wall. I think God knows what that is. But coming back to your journey, because I don't particularly much know, how it all started for you. I mean, at what point I'm always interested in people's stories. Like, at what point did you discover that, oh, maybe I could do directing, or maybe I could do something like that? When did it kind of dawn on you that you could do, or you wanted to do it, or you've always wanted to do it? What was that process for you? What's your story?
Well, I have always loved telling stories. Even as a little kid, I was writing stories and drawing cartoons, and I had a camera on my Game Boy, right?
Hmm.
And you could use that to make little movies
Yeah.
out of your toys and things like that. But it was really my youth. I went to McRobert Youth Theatre
All right.
in the town where I grew up in Stirling, and I had several amazing teachers there, but I had one
Hmm.
amazing teacher called Mary Binney, and she really kind of encouraged and nurtured me to think about taking a greater role in making a production. So I became her assistant on a production
Uh-huh.
because I really liked editing the texts and
Ah.
working with the other actors in these youth theatre productions
Uh-huh.
to kind of get more out of what was there.
Hmm.
And then I realized that I really love working with actors and working with a text and with actors on a text because I eternally marvel the energy and the inventiveness and seeing things that I never saw
Yeah.
and working with people to discover things that I didn't even know was there.
Yeah.
Um, and that's really kind of where that started. And then I worked for various youth theatres around central Scotland.
Hmm.
And then I thought, I've really got to get some training.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to become a professional director, and I was given some advice that, well, I would need to actually do some training. So I applied to the drama
Yeah.
school. And so that's kind of where it started.
And then you went to do the MACCT.
That's right. Yeah.
And then when did you enjoy your time on the course?
Yeah, I really enjoyed my time on the course because what was brilliant about the course was that even as a director, it was
Yeah.
teaching you how to act
Yeah.
and giving a formal education in acting practice and practices
Hmm.
was something that suddenly I realized, and it started me on a journey, which I'm still on now, of discovering all those things that that you've picked up throughout your life and where they actually come from.
Hmm.
the thing with the MACCT is that it was good, but it was also filled with a lot of things that I didn't enjoy at all.
Right.
And it was a mixed bag. Like, I love directing our final piece shows, and I love some of the
Yeah.
acting we got to do.
Yeah.
Um, and I really love some of the people, and then there were some other things that I just hated.
Uh-huh.
Hate. So, when
So
you said, "Do you enjoy it?" I can't even think of a political answer. Do you know what I mean?
So what was one of the things? So what was one of the things you didn't enjoy? Because it sounds like you, because I look at the MS, which I absolutely loved, but of course you learn from the positive and you learn from the negative. That's something that doesn't work for you, or it's not. Maybe it's not that helpful as some other things.
Yeah, I guess going onto the course, I suddenly was confronted with people who had very strong ideas about certain ways of doing things in the
Yeah,
theatre. And I
yeah,
guess we all have those things.
yeah,
Um, but sometimes I felt like I would be coming up against people who didn't want to learn what they were teaching us.
okay,
And I felt that that was very frustrating because it created this atmosphere that put a value on what we were learning.
yeah,
Like, this is not good to learn. This is good to learn. This is not good. We want more of this. Now, maybe it's just me. I don't have strong opinions about that because I really feel that every actor's journey is unique. And the way
hmm,
that an actor learns how to be on stage is in its way unique. There are some people who can just walk out on stage and they'll just do it. And there
yeah,
are some people who have a process, and that's how they understand the play, and then they can just do it. And
yeah,
then there are some people who are very scared. And I understand uh, that I couldn't understand why people would come to learn and then not want to learn.
no, I
And
know,
maybe this is because I really felt like I knew nothing.
yeah,
And so I was desperate to learn everything. One of the strange things about my career, if you want to call it that, because I don't think you really decide what a career path is. One of the strange
yeah,
things about my career is that I've ended up being taught and learning and studying Michael Chekhov technique,
yeah,
which which is not something that I really identify with, if you like, as an actor.
yeah,
But then I keep finding it very, very useful to know all these things about Michael Chekhov technique. And so it
yeah,
does feed into my practice. But I wouldn't go out on stage and say I'm going to,
yeah,
breathe deeply and be gestural theatre. But some of the most moving experiences in my acting training have been
mhm,
through that particular branch of acting training.
yeah,
But I wouldn't say, okay, go and learn Michael Chekhov technique, because I don't think it's for everyone at all,
yeah, mhm,
or even me. But I still
yeah,
find it fascinating because I know that some actors work that way, and I know that
yeah,
some people have to work that way. And then I find the things that challenge you the most can often be unearthing truths about yourself that you already know or your practice. And actually, the things that make you go, the things that kind of get you a gut reaction because you don't like them or whatever,
yeah,
are the things that those feelings are signal pointing you to something much more important. And then
mhm,
you suddenly go, oh, it's this. This is what you needed to discover. Um, and it's one of these things, I think, that we don't particularly like discomfort anymore. We like our life being quite comfortable. But discomfort can be really useful, I think, in art. And not to say that everyone should be a poet kind of going through the worst time of their life, to make
yeah,
any sort of art. But actually engaging with something that gives you a discomfort can be very, very beneficial. I mean, I got into drama school, and then I was so scared that I would be found out for going into drama school having never read any Shakespeare.
ah, right, okay,
Now, you might laugh at that because now I direct classical theatre, I tutor
yeah,
classical theatre, Shakespeare, and I work for Cheap by Jowl. But I got into drama school and I hadn't read anything, so I bought a copy of Hamlet,
Mm-hmm.
And I sat down and I read it, and I didn't understand a single word. I read
Yeah.
the whole thing. You know, when you read something and you've got headache. So I'm there and I'm reading Hamlet and I've got a headache and I'm thinking, oh my God, I can't go to drama school. I can't read Shakespeare. Everyone can read Shakespeare. I don't know what's going on. Like, who's
Yeah.
Hamlet? Who's this Hamlet? Who's old Hamlet? Why does it say Hamlet's father? Is he a ghost? I don't understand what's going on. I couldn't understand a thing. I was just,
Right.
but what it wasn't that I couldn't understand. It's just that I was too busy thinking that I had to understand it, you know?
Right.
So I couldn't read it anymore. But that
Yeah.
was that was, and, it's ultimately not being able to read Shakespeare. I know personally, one of the things that I like to do one of the things I do for the company that I'm associate with, Cheap by Jowl, is that I go around the UK, going into schools and universities and drama colleges, teaching the methods of Declan Donnellan.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I'm constantly up against is we have a perceived idea of what Shakespeare should be.
Mm-hmm.
And it's these kind of very unhelpful ideas that it should be done like this. It is
Mm-hmm.
this kind of great literature that everyone should understand and things like that. And it clouds first what it actually is, but it also stops us really engaging with what it is, which is, for example, telling an amazing story in
Mm-hmm.
a highly poetic way.
And now coming back to so that was the course MACCT. And now since you mentioned Cheek by Jowl, how did that come about? How did you? I mean, how did you end up, getting the job? I think you must be asked that question many times. How did that come about? Why did you want to work for them? Yeah, because I don't really know that story.
Yeah, I do remember once being asked straight out by someone I'd never met, just came straight up to me. How did you get this job?
Because that's what people want to know. Like,
I know,
what's the recipe? How
I
do I
know.
do it?
Well,
I want to do your job.
and the thing is, because I always think about this moment, because I kind of felt like
Yeah.
saying, "Oh, I wore my purple pants that day." Like it's some sort of amazing thing that,
Yeah.
oh, if only I knew that, then everything would go right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's very natural for us to look for the solution. Oh, I'm feeling depressed. I've read that I can eat three Brazil nuts this week and then I'll be cured. It's kind of these things. Everything takes work. Everything
Yeah.
it has to almost be slightly uncomfortable.
So then, so how did it work out? I mean, you wrote a letter to the company, you wrote a letter to Declan Donnellan telling them that you want to work with them. What was the process?
Yeah, I had found out that they were looking for an assistant, and I'd seen a couple of Declan's shows.
Uh-huh.
Ubu Roi, Ubu the King by Alfred Jarry, and I'd seen Tis a Pity, She's a Whore.
Yeah.
And both of these productions, like, they both really blew me away. So suddenly, here was this opportunity to actually go and work with the people that had created them. And I always remember seeing Cheek by Jowl in the Barbican programs, because they would always play
Yeah.
Barbican.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'd always look at these shows and go, wow, what is this company? It looks amazing. But then
Yeah.
I never, I just by chance happened to see Tis a Pity Who's the Horror.
Yeah.
And then by chance see Ubu, and then suddenly realize, oh my God, they're looking for an assistant. So
Yeah.
I wrote to them saying, I really love your work and I really
Yeah.
want to come work with you.
Yeah.
And I was lucky because they called me,
Yeah.
and then they interviewed me pretty rigorously,
Yeah.
um, where we spoke for the first time that Declan and I met, we spoke for 3 hours.
Oh, wow.
Um,
But it was like just a
and
conversation. It wasn't like an interview kind of, or was it just like, because sometimes you know, like what it's like with artistic processes that people just want to get to know you. that what kind of a person you are, rather than just, okay, ask you these formal questions. What was that like? How did you feel after? I mean, what was that process like?
I mean, yeah, Declan was very gracious during the interview process, so it never
Hmm.
felt like it was a formal interview,
Yeah,
but it was very in depth, because I think when you're taking on an assistant, or if you're being an assistant director,
yeah,
that relationship is based entirely on trust, because
yeah,
at one point the director hands over the production to the assistant director to maintain and to look after, so it's a piece of art that you're creating, and then
yeah,
you're giving it to someone else. And the conversations really were about getting to know whether this trust could exist.
yeah,
And of course, I'm sure there must be some element of, do your ideas about theatre align? There's
yeah,
no point in, if you make theatre that has this focus in one way, and then you meet someone and they have a focus which is entirely opposite to yours,
yeah.
and bringing them in uh, to kind of to work alongside you
Hmm.
in that relationship, in that capacity. I mean, where
Yeah,
you have a director, assistant director. It's different if you were creative, collaborating on the same level. But it was really a chance to discover. And actually, it was an amazing process, because I kind of left that experience going, wow, I've actually sat down with one of the world's best directors for 3 hours. And I,
yeah,
I've learned so much in these three
yeah.
hours. Um, that
More
like
than you did,
the
more than the MACCT kind of a whole year.
almost. But that's what was amazing about it. I
Yeah,
kind of away going, gosh, I've got so much to think about, like in
yeah,
terms of your approach to theatre, thinking about what theatre is, what people, the audiences want, and all that. Those conversations are already present, already happening.
yeah,
Um, and that is a testament to,
yeah,
certainly, to what Cheek by Jowl are all about, which is constantly thinking about that and innovating that. So here I
yeah.
am having an interview and then going away. I remember getting back on the bus and sitting on the bus and going, I need to go and almost write everything down, because that was amazing.
That's my mantra from now on. That's it. It's going to be on my wall somewhere in my room. And then, so with Cheek by Jowl, you work a lot of on classical plays, but then, you have your own projects, like, let's say, Intruder or any other new piece of writing. Do you always approach each text in the same way? For example, some people do actioning, or do you approach it differently? Like, depending on the text, you have various approaches or exercises that you do, or is it always kind of the same way of working? What's your process?
I think you've summed it up quite neatly there, almost, by saying that it is different for each text.
Hmm.
Um, each text has its own demands. Each group of actors needs different things. The theatre will need a certain way of rehearsing, depending
Hmm.
on what kind of way you're working in. If you were working outside,
Yeah,
you need to work very much on everyone being able to be heard outside.
yeah,
If you're working on a one-on-one piece with two people in the audience, then it's very different.
yeah.
I do think what probably is the same is the approach to what kind of theatre I'm hoping to create, which
Hmm.
is something that is alive and engaging,
Yeah,
and creates a space for an audience to be contemplative about themselves and about the characters that they're witnessing on stage.
hmm.
Um, so in a way, I guess there's a kind of that in a way, superficially, it would be different every time. There's no
Yeah,
set exercises that I would say that I always use. You mentioned actioning. Actioning can be fantastically useful,
yeah,
um, depending on the actor, depending on the speech, depending on the text, whether it reacts well with that, whether it suddenly gives it a life.
yeah.
And other times, it can get in the way of
Hmm.
what's going on. So there's nothing that I would say. that I would approach, that I would use, like a kind of a technique that I would use every single time.
And then when, let's say someone, wants to be a director or wants to go in that direction, some kind of maybe what like tips, or I know, we discussed it that, there isn't a remedy, or there isn't one thing. There is different ways of approaches to doing whatever you want to do, and there is no one way. Each way is a particular way of whatever, and it's that journey that you go on, and then all of a sudden you end up having a conversation with Declan Donlan from Cheek by Jowl. If there was maybe a couple of things, if you could, I don't know, highlight or give to any aspiring director, or someone who would like to follow that path, what would you say to them? What would you maybe advise them they focus on, or whatever?
That's a great question, Remi. Thanks. I really think it's that every journey is completely individual.
Mm-hmm.
So again, there's no recipe, there's no purple pants, there's no magic thing. There are, of course, like you said, advice. What I can do is I can share advice that I was given, which over the years has come to be very useful. I find some of the best advice you don't understand straight away.
Yeah.
And then it takes years, and 5 years later, you're going, oh, yeah, that was really good advice.
Yeah, it clicks.
Yeah. And the two bits of advice that really affected me the most, one is focus on your craft, and then the career will come.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is really, and I wish I'd heard it much earlier.
Yeah.
Because I think we get very caught up in ideas of what we should have and how things should be and what we want, rather than actually spending time really going, well, how do I make this? Or why am I making this? Or what do I want to make, even as a theatre maker?
Mm-hmm.
And the other bit of advice is, especially if there are any directors listening, is that you probably already know everything you need to know about directing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's not to say you don't need to study, because that goes counter to what I just said.
Yeah.
But there are things that I can't remember the quote exactly, but it's some philosophical quote about there are the things that we know, and the things that we know what we know, and then there are the things that we don't know that we know,
Mm-hmm.
and then there are the things that we don't know that we don't know.
Yeah.
And what I've realized is that I know. And what I've realized is that, yes, actually, when you start directing, you know everything. You kind of have a sense, but you don't know what the important things are. So you think everything's important.
Yeah.
But that's not true. And actually, you have to start to trust your gut instinct.
Yeah.
And it's so important, because I've done things in rehearsals where I go, I'm doing this because I've learned it, or I'm doing it because this is what someone's told me to do, rather than trusting that gut instinct of, I'm doing this because I know that this is somehow the right thing to do.
Right.
And it takes a lot of time to cultivate that, almost that kind of that. But then also it's to figure out what part of your gut is the bit that you really need to listen to. Do you know?
So this is what I said what I said in my previous episodes, and I said that, it's developing resilience to other people's idea, or it's developing resilience as creatives to, and listening to what other people have to, other people tell us to do, rather than us believing in our own instincts to do what we feel is right. So it's, developing that resilience, and knowing what I do is right, and not being influenced or biased by other people, because there are other people.
Absolutely. And, sometimes people give you advice and they don't actually have your best interests at heart.
Mm-hmm.
I remember the first show I ever directed out of drama school. I
Oh yeah.
remember it was a Romeo and Juliet, and I came in to the rehearsal and I was very scared.
No.
Because everyone is scared. You imagine that you start any rehearsal, everyone's scared, director's scared, designer's scared, all the actors are scared, everyone's super frightened, the writer is scared, everyone's petrified.
The
It's going
writer,
everyone.
Shakespeare.
Of course, his ghost is there going, oh, I hope they get this right this time. It's I think it would be good to consider that Shakespeare would be scared. Of course, those plays didn't write themselves. Do you know what I mean?
Know. Yeah.
And that should never be underestimated. That actually you're coming together as a group. That's why your first day of rehearsal is always a write-off, because everyone is just too scared to do anything. First day of rehearsal is about being together and going, aren't we scared? And everyone goes, yeah, we're scared because we're going to show this to the audience. And then you go, okay, and that's a healthy thing. If no one was worried, then nobody cares, at that point, it's kind of, well, why are we doing this? And, but so the first show that I directed after graduating, Romeo and Juliet, and I go into the rehearsal room scared. And so I decide that within, I'd think maybe 1 day, 2 days, I'd applied everything I'd learned on the MACCT. There was no method, no methodology, no exercise left unperformed. It was all done. And I remember getting to the end of day 2 and realizing that I was so out of my depth. I didn't know what I was doing at all. I just thrown all these things at these actors who were gracious enough to accept and do them. And I was working with some amazing actors as well, and I can't imagine that they thought, oh my God, what have we got ourselves into?
Yeah.
And so I really had to stop and go, okay, actually, I am out of my depth. Actually, I know that. That's something I know. That's in my gut. I'm out of my depth. I know that I can do this, but I don't know. I'm not doing it right now. And so I had to turn around to the company and say, okay, this is my first time directing, and I need your help. And you've all got much more experience than me.
Yeah.
And I need you to help me to do this. And then after that, I could then start to see again. I could start to go, oh, of course. Oh no, but this is why. This is what I am doing as a director. This is why I'm telling the story. But in those 2 days, all I thought was, oh, I've got to apply all these things because this is what I've learned and this is what other people have told me and this is what I need to do. And it was it's kind of recognizing that sometimes your gut instinct, my gut instinct there was going, listen, you're in big trouble and you've got to do something about it. If I didn't listen to that, I could have just plowed on with my exercises for 3 weeks and then we could have done the show and everyone would have been really unhappy. In the end,
it is a very brave thing to say in rehearsals, though, right? I mean, I've never heard anyone, saying, it's my first production. It's a very courageous thing to do.
I think,
but very honest.
I think we can all owe it to each other as artists to be honest in a rehearsal room, because I remember being taught by a director at drama school who said, he goes into rehearsal and he says, I don't know how we're going to do this, but we're going to find out together. And this is a bit of advice that I remember wrestling with, because I actually thought, well, it's quite dishonest if you go in with the intention of not knowing what you're going to do.
Yeah.
It's good to go in with an idea to be able to abandon it. That is much more important.
Yeah.
But actually, in a rehearsal room, because I would never say, I don't really focus on truth or, the realist or the honesty of the characters, because, mostly characters aren't saying how they feel. They're saying what they think they should say to get what they want. And there's a lot of deception in plays. But actually the truth comes almost in knowing yourself and kind of admitting to yourself, like, I am scared to do this scene, or I am scared to tackle this, or I don't think this is going to work, or I don't have the idea that is going to work. It can be incredibly freeing to kind of go, well, this is difficult. Because it is difficult. Creating art is difficult, and I think it doesn't help anyone to pretend that it's not difficult. It's actually quite egotistical to pretend it's not difficult. It is a struggle. I mean, look at yourself. It's 10 years is an amazing amount of time dedicated to this project, and it's kind of amazing that here we are now talking in this podcast.
But it's interesting what you've just said, that actually when we went into rehearsals for Intruder, we did have a couple of ideas, but a lot of the ideas for the show, although we've not finished rehearsals yet, but during the first week or during that first day, the first scene, it was literally born out of what we discussed then when we were there in the rehearsal room, which is hysterical. I mean, how it all starts, and what I do. We never kind of pre-planned it. We discussed it, and it kind of went with it.
I'm a big believer in inspiration, and what I mean by that is that there are things in the play that you've written that we don't know, and the play will tell us, and we have to be open to discovering it. And if we remake this show in 10 years, we'll have a different inspiration.
Yeah.
But in that moment, that was this kind of like, almost a kind of gift from the gods. Here is how it works. And you've got to be open to that. I mean, you can have plans, but you also have to be ready to get rid of them as soon as something more exciting arrives into the rehearsal room.
Yeah. It's interesting because I was watching something on YouTube, one of these conversations with some people, and someone was saying that, there was no age in theater. At the very beginning, when you start in theater, you play young, old, but then at the very, the bottom line, there was no age. You can play, you could be 60, you can play 20-year-old and stuff like that. And it kind of, then when I listened to that, it made me think, oh my God, I mean, what if when I'm 70, and hopefully I get to 70, what if I played that part? Wouldn't it be interesting for me, like when I'm 70, to play my 15-year-old? Or, to talk about a story when I was 30 years old now, performing it then? There's a completely different take on a performance that took place 40 years earlier. Isn't that interesting?
I think we're constantly evolving and constantly rewriting what we've even understood about things. And I think that's what's magic in theatre, is something that you think you understood in 40 years, you will have understood it completely differently, even something you've written. Which, it kind of shows that the great art does require some sort of subconscious level, and all sorts of things that you don't intend arise. And then as you grow as an artist, you discover different things that resonate with that. So I'm sure that when we rewrite this in 40 years, it'll be a very different show.
Completely different show. Like, what was I thinking? What was Marcus thinking when he came up with this idea? Why did I write that line? I now know why I wrote that line, but it's interesting. Even hopefully when we come back to rehearsing it and doing it, and then even when I'm in my 80s, hopefully I can do the show and that'll be completely different. That's interesting. It's a different spin on a particular piece that was performed so many years earlier. That's very, very interesting. Any other tips or maybe inspirational quotes for anyone else that could be listening?
I think it's good to surround yourself with collaborators who take an interest in your work and take an interest in you and who are kind. You can't underestimate how someone who is genuine and genuinely likes what you do, how good that is for your work.
Yeah.
For your practice. Even to know that someone likes your work can be an amazing impetus to continue to create your work. I think as an artist, you go through moments of self-doubt. And then if someone says, yes, but I really like this thing that you did, then, it's good to keep those people around you and cultivate friendships with them.
Yeah. To focus, to keep them, it's kind of like they're getting on your train, as I always say. Some people get off that train and some people stay on your train and they move compartments and but they're still on that train, like you being the train, and they travel with you. And sometimes people get off and get on back again. And sometimes people say, I just want that life ticket to stay on that train. I don't care. I could be in the, carriage number 29, whatever that is. But I'm just going with that train. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's very nice to hear from Marcus Montgomery Roche. But one more thing I wanted to ask, because you Scottish and French, right? Have you ever thought of, maybe directing a group of French actors? I don't know if that ever happened, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I have. I actually work with a company in London who bases their work on international work called Exchange Theatre,
Right.
which has given me some opportunity to work with multilingual casts as well.
Right.
Yeah, I actually love the French theatre, and I love the French contemporary theatre as well. And I'm always looking for opportunities to work with French actors. I actually had the opportunity as at Cheek by Jowl to go and work on the French version of Pericles, which was just amazing to be working in the other language I speak, and on a Shakespeare. It was kind of quite an experience.
Yeah.
And I think it's always good to take this opportunity to go and work in another culture whenever you can, because it teaches you so many different things, apart from just another way of working, but it also teaches you about what you value and what you value to translate from those cultures.
Yeah, so you're very much interested in also working with bilingual performers and on bilingual text like Intruder, which is bilingual, and you're open to all these opportunities as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I just think there's so much. Why discount something that can be an experience to learn from?
Yeah. Okay, so that'll be it for episode 14 of Intruder Theatre in the Making podcast. Thank you, Marcus, for joining us in our journey. I hope everyone's enjoyed it. And next in the next episode, I'm going to talk about our journey of rehearsed readings, how we did it and what happened, because we did have quite a lot, 4.5, which was quite a process. That's what the listeners of the podcast can expect in the next couple of episodes. So thank you so much for tuning in. Stay well, stay safe, And thank you, Marcus.
Thank you, Remi. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast.
And I'll speak to you next time. I mean, the listeners. Bye for now.